I said he was pathetic, and quite frankly, I was disgusted by the fact he didn't come back for Prince Philip's memorial service.
Here, he was somebody, and there is just another celebrity. In my view, he's the loser.
She just had a wonderful, wonderful sense of humour.
When she smiled, the room lit up, you know, it just seemed everything was right in the world.
Thank you, ma'am, for so many wonderful, wonderful memories. I miss you a lot.
Hello, I'm Matt Wilkinson and welcome to our show, Royal Exclusive. With me today is the late Queen's former police officer Dick Griffin and legendary royal photographer Arthur Edwards. Thank you both for coming on.
Pleasure.
Now, we're holding this show this week because it's 2 years, incredibly, since we were mourning the death of Queen Elizabeth II. It was September the 8th, 2022, and I want to go through some memories of the day, but also, you know, your many, many years of working with the late Queen, and hopefully some happier stories, maybe some, you know, of positive times when the Queen was still alive. The Queen and now the King has faced many challenges, you know, throughout their reign. One of them is obviously, you know, the situation with Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex. Last week, I'm sure you saw, front page of The Sun, Harry came back for this funeral for his uncle, Lord Fellows. He also stayed with Earl Spencer at Althorpe, and he didn't speak to William and didn't go to see his father. There's reports coming out, whether we believe them or not, about Harry wanting to come back and do a little bit more work or to rehabilitate himself, or reaching out for friends to come back and, you know, come back and have a little bit of his old life. How do we read that? I mean, do you think you could see Harry coming back to work? Do you think he'd be welcomed by the rest of the family?
Well, I think the first thing he's got to sort out is no Ravik. The Royal and VIP Executive Committee have decided he's not going to get protection in this country, and of course that's an ongoing saga. He's still arguing about whether he should get it or not. I mean, I'm not quite sure why he thinks he should get it, because...
Well, I was going to ask you, Dick, I mean, as a former, you know, police officer for the Queen, you know, is he right to be pursuing
this?
No,
he's not, because if he was coming back to take over a full royal family life, he would automatically get it anyway. And the government are not silly. If they review every visit to this country and what they know all the threat assessments, and if they think whoever it is, it could be you or Harry, if he needs protection, he'll be given protection. And I got really annoyed because he never came back for Prince Philip's memorial service, and I was quoted on the press, and I still maintain it. And when I was interviewed by Sky, I said he was pathetic, and quite frankly, I was disgusted by the fact he didn't come back after all he'd done for it. And his excuse of security just didn't wash, because if he's not worried about security, he could have stuck, as it happened with his father, Prince Charles, who's got the best security in the land. And I think it was just an excuse.
I agree with you, Dick. He's got to start sort of seeing things as they really are, and he's no longer welcome here, it just seems, and he's going to have to make a big act of contrition, in my view, to the King before he gets back, because, quite honestly, they're frightened to have him with them in things, because any conversation they may have could be in the next TV programme, and they're not prepared to do that anymore. And I think obviously, I always believe in the parable of the prodigal son. I think everything's possible, but at the moment it doesn't look likely.
I often think with you mentioned about security, it's kind of insulting to the police officers, to the royal household, to the Home Office to say that I don't feel safe in the UK. Of course he'll be safe. Harry would be safe when he come here. You know, that there are situations in regulations and organisations in place that would actually keep him safe. I mean, do you think it's an insult to people in the UK?
You know, one of his ex-protection officers has gone with him to the States, and in fact did go with him to the court cases. I did see him in the background. And he would be banging heads together if he thought the threat was there. Well, if he thought the threat was there, he shouldn't allow him to come to the country in the first place. But the Princess Royal's children don't get protection. And look at their life. You know, Peter and Zara live perfectly wonderful lives. They're in the public eye, but there's no perceived threat to them, and they don't. Princess Anne doesn't ask for them to get protection.
Beatrice, and usually they don't get police protection either. No, I think he thinks he's bigger than he actually is, and I also feel that Meghan is becoming. I don't think almost she doesn't want to come here anymore. He comes back, but she never comes with him. And what really upsets the king is the fact he's never going to see his grandchildren. These two, this little boy and this little girl, should be playing with their cousins at Balmoral now. They should be here enjoying the life of the royal family. Instead of that, they're stuck in this house, or where is it, in Montecito, and they're just celebrities in another town full of celebrities. Here, he was somebody, and there is just another celebrity. In my view, he's the loser, big time.
Well, I read in the paper this morning, before he went, he was the most popular member of the royal family. And now he's right down, almost at the bottom of the list. He's slightly above Meghan.
Okay, and slightly above Andrew as well.
Well,
we'll go to Andrew after.
Yeah.
Can I take you back to September the 8th?
Yeah.
There was a slow drip feed of information throughout the day. We heard rumours swirling around. We saw the members of the royal family heading up to Balmoral. But Dick, if I start with you, you worked with the Queen for 3 decades, okay, as her police officer.
Yeah.
What were the emotions running through your head when you were actually finally given that news, that statement? I think it was 6:30 in the evening that Queen Elizabeth II had passed.
I think I'd had a few hours, because I was working for Sky at the time, and we had the outside broadcast unit outside the main gates of Buckingham Palace. So during the afternoon, we were getting drip-fed all this information that things weren't great, and I think we all put 2 and 2 together and made 4. And so when we got the official announcement at 6:30, it confirmed what most of us already thought. But obviously it was devastating news. I mean, I'd worked for her for 14 and a half years and Prince Philip for 14 years before that. And, we were so close to her, and it was just devastating news.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'll be interested to find out later as we talk about what the kind of atmosphere was like outside Buckingham Palace and the next couple of days. But Arthur, we spoke on the day, earlier in the day when the Queen died, because you were in Scotland just a couple of hours out.
Yeah, I was at Dumfries House, which is a stately home that then Prince of Wales had converted into this amazing park, and I was there covering an engagement for our health awards, and I stayed overnight, and the following morning I was checking out the hotel, and suddenly all the staff coming running about, all the policemen come running in, grabbing their bags, and then his personal staff, his valet, and they all rushed in, and then the cab driver turned up for me. He said, "Oh, sorry, I'm late." He said, "because I just saw the Prince of Wales getting in a helicopter." Well, he had no engagements that day, so I figured that they'd all gone back to Balmoral, and then I rang the editor and said, "I think this is off. I think the Queen's in a bad way. I think the King's left here now," and I rang everybody. Rang you. I just figured that it was near the end, and what convinced me of that was there was a picture taken where she met Liz Truss, a lovely picture by Jane Barlow, and the Queen looked so very frail in that picture, so very thin. And I thought, Mike, she's really struggling here. She made this amazing smile, and when I heard the news, and I came back to London, and obviously we'd done the obituary for the paper. We just prepared all that for the next day, and it was just a very sad moment. And I can only remember the Queen all my life. I remember when I was at school, I think it was 12, when the head teacher came in and said, "Oh, the King's died today," and everybody carried on eating their dinner. Nobody seemed to care. But I've been working with her for nearly 40 years, and I thought these great times and that wonderful smile she had, and no more. I mean,
because I was on an aeroplane, so I was sent to Scotland because we, spoke to Arthur in the morning and we knew something was up. So I got dispatched to Scotland, and I actually managed to get the Wi-Fi. We had a nod that the statement would be coming, and I managed to get the email out quickly, send it to the office to, I think it was 6:30 p.m. Where were you when you were told the Queen had died?
I think I was. I think I just listened to the news. I think gave it out. I think that was when I heard.
So you were outside Buckingham Palace.
Yes.
What was the atmosphere like in London? There was obviously, were the people around? Was the news filtering through to members of the public?
What was happening? People were obviously beginning to gather what was happening. The crowds were beginning to gather. And when the announcement came at 6:30, what amazed me, and I should have been prepared for it because I was involved with the Princess of Wales when she died, was the crowds coming to the front of Buckingham Palace. Yeah. It was all sorts. There were children, there were teenagers, there were old age pensioners, there were vagrants, all sorts of people from all positions in life were coming to lay flowers. And we finally finished work probably about 11:30 that night, and I was on the way to Victoria Station, and they were still piling up in front of the palace. And that, I should have realised anyway, but that made me realise, you know, the affection that people had in this country for Her Majesty the Queen. And we saw with the queues, people pay their last respects when she was lying in state.
Yeah, oh, yeah, the queue, of course.
The people who, you know, people like David Beckham queued for something like 8-9 hours. I mean, what a statement that was.
All night, my daughter sat all night long going before she got to see the Queen. Yeah, to see the coffin lying there. Yeah, it was amazing. Same with Diana. I mean, thousands of people were just laying flowers at Kensington Palace then. I remember them days. I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
But the Queen went on for days, that people marching past every night, every day. And the people that jibbed the queue, the people that got a terrible...
Yeah.
Terrible time for it.
Well, people should have known better.
Well, they should have done, yeah.
If you're going to pay your respects, you queue up.
You've got to
do it properly. You don't jump the queue.
Yeah.
Can we talk about some happier times?
Absolutely.
As I say, you know, what a reign, you know, 70 years on the throne. As you pointed out, 14 years with the Queen, another 14 or 15 years as Prince Philip, so about 30 years, you know, close to the Queen. How do you remember her? You know, you must have had some great personal moments and great times that you can share with us maybe with the late Majesty?
Oh, I had some, you know, sad times when members of the family passed away, but also so many happy moments, trying to avoid the press sometimes, give her a bit of privacy. Yeah. But no, I was just involved in lots of funny stories. I can give you a few examples if you want to. And of course, there's the famous story of the American tourists at Balmoral.
Yeah, we need to hear that one again. That's
Well, the one at Balmoral, normally the Queen would go to Balmoral, which was definitely her favourite residence, late July, and she'd stay there until early October. And police officers used to do 2 weeks there and 2 weeks back in London. And normally on my 2 weeks, every Thursday, when there wasn't a shooting day, the staff would make a little picnic. I'd put in my backpack, and the two of us would go walking up in the Highlands, sometimes for 2-3 hours. And it was the one day of the week she got a bit of peace and quiet. She didn't have red boxes and private secretaries chasing her. And we were walking along one sunny August day, and there's a couple of hikers walking towards us. And Her Majesty would always stop and say hello. And as it happened, there was an American couple on a walking holiday. And it was obvious from the moment we stopped that the American gentleman hadn't recognised the Queen, which is fair enough because she had a Barber jacket on and a headscarf. And he started telling Her Majesty where they'd come from America, where they were going to next. And I could see it coming. Where do you live? Well, she said, I live in London, but I've got a holiday home just the other side of the hills. How often do you come up here? He's heard this a million times before. How often do you come up here? Well, she said, I'll be coming up here ever since I was a little girl. It's over 80 years. And you could see him thinking, well, if you've been coming up here for over 80 years, you must have met the Queen. And as quick as a flash, she says, well, I haven't, but Dick here meets her regularly. He says, wow, you meet the Queen? What's she like? And I couldn't resist it because I knew she had a sense of humour. Well, she's very cantankerous at times. And then she gave me this look. And I said, but she's got a wonderful sense of humour. Anyway, before I could stop him, he comes across, puts his arm around my shoulder, gives his camera to the Queen and asks her to take a picture of the two of us. Which she duly does, and then we swap places and I take a photograph of them with the Queen. And we waved goodbye and we never let on. And I remember the Queen saying to me, I just hope when he gets back to America and he shows those photographs to his friends, someone will tell him who I am.
I can never get bored of listening to that story.
Well, I remember up at Sandringham once when the Queen, we were there, Prince Charles had a girlfriend up there, and we were trying to get pictures of this, and the note came from all the editors, whatever you do, do not harass the Queen. So the Queen turned up with her dogs, and we all put our cameras down, and she did the back of the Range Rover, all the dogs piled out, and she looks round and she sees that no one's taking pictures. And she walks off with the dogs, looking round, no one's taking pictures. And she said to the policeman, and I won't say who it was, and he told me later, she said, what's all that about? He said, well, ma'am, he said, they've been told on no account must they harass you. She said, I don't know what's worse, she said, being harassed or being ignored.
What was she? I mean, you spent a lot of time. Obviously, you'd have been travelling in cars. You'd have been travelling abroad. You must have had lots of private moments with her, which you can or cannot kind of talk about. But what personality traits that members of the public or people that have been supporting the royal family for many years that you would like to point out? Is there anything
I think a lot of the things people probably wouldn't have picked up on is Her Majesty's sense of humour. She just had a wonderful, wonderful sense of humour, and she was always playing little silly jokes on me. And I remember once taking her to visit the Queen Mother, because Queen Mum has a residence called Burke Hall, which is about 8 miles from Balmoral. And when I first started working for Her Majesty, we went down there one Sunday, and she introduced me. Mummy, she said, this is my new detective. He's a Welshman. And they'd obviously worked this out between them. And the Queen Mum said, oh, Welshman, eh? Can you say the name of that very, very very long station in Wales? And I said, well, not properly. It's something like Llanfair, Pwthgwyn, Winthrowbury, Llantadilly, Goff. Oh, no, you silly man. I'm in Cardiff Central. You know, and we get in the car afterwards, and the Queen says, I can't believe you fell for that. Another occasion, it's my little granddaughter, when she's 4 or 5, asked me to go to a school and give a talk, which I did. And then the biggest mistake I've ever made, when you ask children, don't ask them to ask you questions. Because I had questions like, have I taken the Queen to Pizza Hut? Did I have to sleep in the Queen's bedroom? Did I have to go into the Queen's bedroom and turn her bedside light off? But a few weeks later, it was Christmas, and Her Majesty always used to host a Christmas lunch for her staff. And I was asked to propose a toast and to say a few words. And I said, what you don't know, Your Majesty, is when I gave that talk to Isla's class, some of the questions I was asked, number 1, do we sleep together? And number 2, when we go out in public, do we hold hands? And the Queen very quickly came back and said, well, I certainly hope not. And one of the footmen said, to which question? She said, I'm not telling you that, so that's Dick and I's little secret. And my wife's still trying to work out which one is the truth.
That's a shame, because on my list of questions I was going to ask you some of those about the Pizza Hut. No, I'm joking. I'm sure I read somewhere the other day something about there was an incident at Balmoral where we thought that the Queen may have been shot. Was that the incident?
Oh, that's probably the one on the Grosmore, which I've read in the latest book about the Queen, which is slightly exaggerated.
What was the real story?
Well, the true story is we were out in the Grosmore one day, and the guns would all be in their little holes waiting for the grouse to come along. And the Queen and I and the lady in waiting would normally walk about 200 yards further back and sit in the heather and wait for the drive. And she'd send her gun dogs out to collect the dead birds. Anyway, on this particular day, it was just the two of us, and it was awful weather, really, really foggy. So we were stood up just watching the shoot. And I remember telling the Queen a story, and I remember looked back to make sure everything was safe. And I looked back, and the Queen had disappeared. And I thought, how does the Queen disappear on a Grosmore? And I quickly looked around, and there she was, lying at my feet. And of course, the worst thing for any protection officer is a member of the royal family to be taken ill, especially 60 miles from Aberdeen Airport, Aberdeen Hospital. Anyway, I quickly realised, I bent down to look after her, and I quickly realised what had happened. One of the guns had shot a grouse, and it had come tumbling out of the air. Now, you can imagine a chicken falling down from 200 feet and landing on top of you.
Oh, God, yeah.
And it landed on top of her. And, of course, there she was, blood and gore and feathers. And as it happened, she subsequently found out she'd broken a couple of ribs.
Oh, wow.
And I had to stand her up. And I always remember very discreetly trying to brush her down to get all these feathers and bits and pieces off her. And I remember saying to me, for goodness sake, just get on with it and clear me up. So there I was, sort of, with the Majesty the Queen. And I remember saying, I really shouldn't be doing this, Your Majesty. Your husband's over there with a double-barreled shotgun. But I read a story recently in one of the books alleging that story happened, and the policeman went down and gave her mouth-to-mouth.
Oh, God.
And that's the closest she's ever been. I mean, that's a lot of nonsense, that was.
Yeah. You've had a very lucky, not lucky, but you've had an incredible career. I've only been doing this job for about 4 years, so there was a problem with COVID was involved, so we didn't get to see much of the Queen. And then she, sadly passed 2 years ago. I think there was only one real engagement where I saw her close up. She was at an engagement in Scotland. They didn't really make much coverage, but it was like a company making satellite technology. And I was just staggered. Every single person she went to, her eyes were bright. She had incredible questions. She kind of knew so much about this engagement and the company. And I had to file afterwards on the laptop in this office, and the amount of people that she had spoken to that were walking around, phoning their family, phoning them, I just met the Queen asked me this. The power and the kind of impact that she had when she met people on engagements was incredible, wasn't it, Arthur? You had seen her so many times on engagements.
And for me, obviously, it was when she smiled, because when she smiled, the room lit up, it just seemed everything was right in the world. And you'd wait for that smile, and then suddenly see someone would say something to her, and her face would burst into a smile, and you just waited for that all the time. And over the years, I mean, I got to know all these little things, the way she would be always very shy. She would always walk in, and I remember we were in America. I don't know if you were there, Dick, when she went to the home of Alice Frazier, a lady who lived in one of the projects outside Washington. And before I was in the room, I was the pool photographer. And the Secret Service came in and said, look, on no account must any of you move. When the Queen comes in, don't put your hand out unless the Queen puts her hand out. And whatever you do, don't speak to the Queen before she speaks to you. So I'm standing there, the Queen walks in, Alice, big black lady, rushed across the room, hugged the Queen. And I couldn't believe it. And I just quickly took the picture, and the Queen smiling, and never forgotten it. And later, obviously, the Secret Service had to apologise to you guys for letting you down. But, it was just the biggest shock of my life. I mean, this woman just hugged the Queen. So, there were moments when you just had to be there. And I remember talking to the Baltimore Sun that morning saying, what are you expecting today? I said, I'm expecting a great picture. I never realised it was a tremendous picture. I mean, it published everywhere in the world. It published every newspaper in America the next day, and every paper in Great Britain except the Sun.
One of the stories I love telling. It's one of the new protection officers. I sent him up but Queen was just going up to Balmoral just for a long weekend to stay at Craiggowan, and I said to the chap, all will happen. She'll probably go for a few walks with the dogs, and you take her to church on Sunday. So they came back, and I was taking her on the Monday out to a private engagement. So it gave me a chance to speak to her about the new protection officer. And I said, how did things go? And she said, he's really, really nice. I like him. He'll be a good addition to the team. But he's very, very nervous. You've got to get him to relax a bit. And I said, well, man, we're all terrified when we first started working with you. You're the Queen. And I said, why do you think he was that nervous? And she said, well, he took me to church on Sunday, and it's only about a mile's drive. And he opened the car door, and so I got in the back seat. And as I got into the back seat, he slammed the door on me before I was halfway in the car. So it hit my shoulder, and I sort of went back against the door, and my big hat got stuck in the door as he shut it. So she said, rather than upset him, because I knew he was rather uptight, she said, I went to church with my hat pinned in the door. And obviously, and I remember watching the news that night and seeing the Queen going to church, looking at a very funny angle, waving to people. And I knew at the time she had a bad back. And when I told the guy, he said, oh, I wonder. He said, I kept looking in them because we had a mirror that you could see back into the people sitting in the back of the car. He said, I wonder why she was sitting in such a strange angle. But it just shows what a lovely lady she was. Rather than upset the new protection officer, she was happy to go along to church with her head pinned in the door.
Talking about Balmoral, I remember once in India at a press reception for the Queen and the Duke, and I said to her, why do you keep going to Balmoral for your holidays every year? She said, why? I said, well, you could go anywhere, you're the Queen. She said, yeah, but I quite like it there. Anyway, I got put in my place, obviously, and I walked away, and Lady Susan Hussey came over. And she said, oh, we're laughing over there. She said, why? She said, well, what you don't realise, she said, when the Queen drives through the gates of Balmoral at the start of her holiday, she kicks her shoes off with delight. She's so happy to be there.
Well, she was a country girl, really, wasn't she?
Well,
she loved the country.
countryside.
Well, she was for 3 months of the year, and she was able to be. This is why I asked Susan this. She said, "Well, no one bothers her. None of the estate workers stop and stare at her. All the policemen are hidden boxes, so you don't see them. She just walks around with the dogs, and for 3 months of the year, she just lives a relaxed, normal life." And that was explained to me in no circumstances wherever she went. And I said, "Well, you're the Queen. You can go anywhere in the world, man." But I remember once when we went to Kentucky, I don't know if you were in that trip, when she stayed with that family. I mean, the press at the airports photographing them and everything, imagine she didn't want to put up with any of that.
But she was always interested in your families as well. I used to do a lot of marathon running, and she was always interested in how I got on. And if I did the London Marathon, I always had to ring her up or ring the page up and give her my time. And she used to sponsor me as well if I was doing it for charity. And when I did my 100th full marathon, my running club, Blackheath and Bromley Harriers, had laid on a little party for me. And the president at the time wrote to the palace and asked if it was possible that the Queen could write a letter, not expecting a reply. Back comes the letter with the usual platitudes you'd expect. But the line I like is, "Aren't you lucky to have such a wonderful employer who allows you so much time off to take part in these events?" And when my first grandson was born, she said to me in the car one day, she said, "All you've spoken about for the last 9 months is how excited you were to be a grandfather." And she said, "No, I understand he's born, and you haven't even bothered showing me a photograph." So I said, "Well, that's easy enough. Here's the photograph." No, she said, "That's not good enough." She said, "I want to meet him." And I said, "Well, it's not that easy." She said, "Yes, it is." She said, "I'm staying at a friend's house in Kent. Lady Mountbatten used to have a house down there next weekend. I understand your daughter lives in Ashford, so get her to bring the baby along." So little Joshua had to get produced at 6 or 7 weeks so the Queen could have a cuddle with my grandson.
Oh, wow.
And that just shows, she was always genuinely interested, as in fairness was Prince Philip.
Yeah. I mean,
I photographed all my grandchildren with a picture of the Queen giving her flowers up at Wolferton, that church. Yeah. And I mean, they've all got them framed at home. It's it's a big picture for them. It's a big moment for them when they met her. So she was like that. And when you talk about a sense of humour, when I went up to get my medal at the palace, I walked forward. She said, "I can't believe I'm giving you this." So she pinned the medal on me. And then I said, "Well," and then she asked me how long I'd been photographing her. 25 years, 27 years. And she said, "Well, let's have our photograph taken together." So she she just had that lovely way of making you feel better at the end of it, didn't she?
I heard a lovely story last night. I was giving a Women's Institute talk, and one of the guests was the widow of a former protection officer, and she was telling me the story that when Simon went to an investiture to get his MVO, Her Majesty presented it and said, "How long did you work for my sister, Princess Margaret?" And he said, "Oh, 12 years, Your Majesty." "Wow," she said, "you deserve something more than a medal for looking after my sister for 12 years. And those are just great stories, aren't they?
She just always surprised me. I know 2 weeks after I got my medal, and I was at Windsor Horse Show, and she suddenly comes up to me, she says, "Why are you not wearing your medal today?" And I thought, because when they do, she stumbled in for an answer, and I said, well, ma'am, I didn't expect to be coming here today, otherwise I would have done. But obviously, she just was laughing, and of course all the staff were laughing. You probably as well, Dick, at the remarks. So, no, she had a great sense of humour, but it was when she smiled, it just made the world light up. I promise you, it was just wonderful. The best pictures I've got of the Queen are when she's got that beaming smile, and when the Derby, she used to love the Derby, and she'd be up there and she'd be absolutely screaming the horses home. It was great moments. I've done some great tours. I did the last tour with you, Dick, to Australia. Do you remember that? Yeah. The crowds in Brisbane, 30 deep. You remember people were fainting. I've never seen anything like it. The love for the Queen was incredible. It was absolutely incredible, yeah.
I was going to ask you, you touched on it there. I was going to say, well, did you have a favourite photograph of the late
My favourite photograph of the Queen is at the Derby, where she's roaring with laughter. Like the Lady Angela Oswald had told her a joke, and she's just roaring with laughter. And the big test for me was, of course, the Derby is always on a Saturday. It used to be on a Wednesday, but it's now moved to a Saturday. But I still went, and I've got this sequence of pictures of her laughing. But because we had no paper on Sunday, I didn't think it'd get used, but their pictures were so good, they used them on the Monday, and I got a great show. And I've never stopped showing that picture to people, you know, is a absolutely completely relaxed. Probably she had the winner in the sweep, and she was just roaring with laughter. And I can always remember her and the Queen Mother screaming as the horses were coming to the final furlong. So, you know, it was those were the days when you sort of took great pleasure in getting a picture. Or the Duke of Edinburgh, he'd be quite interested. He'd be sort of like this, you know. So it was, I think when she was like off duty, I felt the Queen sort of a bit off duty for the races. It was, you got some great stuff, yeah.
I've got a photograph of Her Majesty. We were out in the Grosmore, and it was a beautiful summer's day, and she hadn't bothered taking any waterproofs, and it's quite a walk up the hill. And the weather changed very quickly, which meant I had to run down the hill to get her waterproofs. So being a gentleman, I took off my barber jacket and wrapped it round her, gave her my scarf and gave her my gloves. And as I walked off, I took off my shooting hat and put it on top of her headscarf and said, well, Your Majesty, you got the rest of my clothes. You might as well have my hat as well. Unfortunately, she laughed. So I got on the hill and get her waterproofs and bring them back, and we swapped clothes. And I thought no more of it. 3 weeks later, she calls me into her office and he hands me an envelope and says, I want you to have that. And opened it up, and she'd had a photograph taken of her dressed in all my clothes. And she'd had it put in a beautiful silver frame. And she said, I want you to keep that as a souvenir of that very, very funny afternoon we had in Scotland. And this is the one photograph I've got at home that my wife will not let me take to any of my... You're not taking that out of the house, because it's such a wonderful photograph.
Yeah. You paint a picture of a lot of fun, you know, of really happy times. That, you know, the Queen was very relaxed, with a great sense of humour. But the pair of you travelled, as you say, you pointed out earlier, went abroad. You were both on engagements together. What was that like when she was working? Was there a difference? Did you have like a game face on? Was there a change when she knew that she was actually, you know, doing something, either a foreign tour or going to the state opening of Parliament or something like that? Was she different when she was actually working?
No, she was. She was obviously a little more serious. I mean, she was very well briefed by her private secretaries on everything she knew that was going to happen. But like walkabouts, I mean, she would always, the way to meet the Queen on a walkabout was to have flowers. She would not walk past a child if kids had flowers.
There's a tip for anybody watching if you walk about.
But the problem was Prince Philip would go up one side of the road and Her Majesty would go up the other. And Prince Philip would get his police officers to lift the kids on his side of the road over the barriers.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
To go across and present flowers to the Queen. And the police used to get really agitated about all these kids running across to the Queen.
Oh, wow.
And they used to say, we're not worried about security, but you guys walk down the street and we're left with 50 kids whose parents we can't find. But we used to fill up carloads with flowers. We used to go to residential homes and hospices, because NHS hospitals obviously don't want flowers because they can't cope with it. And but she'd be incredibly well briefed and interested in people's stories. Yeah. And you must have seen that Arthur all the time.
Yeah, I remember once up at Beverley, Jim Beaton was a police officer with the Queen before Dick, and he'd retired, and he was there with his grandchildren. And I said, ma'am, just came over and I took pictures of Dick with his grandchildren and the Queen. Yeah, she just made such a fuss of the kids, more of the kids when she did the gym. Yeah.
Do you think she enjoyed being Queen? You know, you talk about so many happy stories that really made me smile. I think, you know, it's great to remember, you know, these lovely happy stories and her, you know, the sense of humour.
I mean, it's difficult to say because she became Queen at such a young age and was Queen for 70 years. And I think we all agree she was absolutely wonderful at the job. I can't think of any one thing she did wrong. You know, she put duty and care before everything. And she was just a wonderful, wonderful person, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. And if you, I remember when another briefing was at, and just after Diana died, so it must have been November after Diana died, and I said, ma'am, I said, you know, your amazing speech to the nation over Diana, I said, and the fact you did it live. I said, I was in a pub in Westminster and the whole pub went quiet. And she said, in a pub? I said, yes, ma'am. I said, I was in a pub watching and everybody watched you. I said, then she started to tell me about it. She said, it wasn't quite live, she said, but, you know, we had microphones in the geraniums outside the window. And she started explaining what they did to get it done. I said, you know, it was so brilliant. It was brilliant. And it was, of course, at the time, when you think that there was questions in the papers, wasn't it? Where are the royals? Where are the Queen? Why is the the flag not a half-mast at Buckingham Palace. And she came back with the Duke, and I remember looking at the flowers outside the front of Buckingham Palace, and there were thousands and thousands. And then she made this amazing speech, and I remember afterwards I talked to people here, and they said, that was just stopped it all straight away. Everybody so forgave her, and quite honestly, I didn't think she should come back. I mean, she had Prince Charles up there in a terrible state. She had the children, Diana's children, William and Harry, they were mourning their mother, and she was comforting them, and she was helping them, and I thought she should have been there, but of course people were sort of screaming, saying that that they should be in London.
Well, it was the timing, wasn't it? The timing was right. It had reached that stage, and I think she timed that speech at the right time. Sorry, Dick.
Perfect speech.
But she came back from Balmoral on the Thursday, and we can all see the picture of the car stopped outside North Centre gates, and her and Prince Philip, as Arthur said, went to look at the flowers, and I was with Prince Philip walking with them, and they were taking flowers off the children and putting them amongst all the huge lot of flowers. And one of the things I always remember, and it was really, really moving, this little girl handed Her Majesty flowers, and the Queen said something, I'll put them over there. She says, no, ma'am, they're for you. Yeah. And the Queen was really, really touched about that.
That was a great...
It was just a lovely, lovely thought.
That story was in the film, The Queen, with Ella Mirren. They used that story in there, yeah.
Well, that kind of changed everything. I mean, we're talking, we won't go into that week, but the Queen arriving back at Buckingham Palace, and you say that moment where she was given the flowers and said, no, it's for you, Mum. I think that kind of changed everything. She had that kind of power, didn't she, as the Queen, to come back and kind of unify the nation. We've spoken lots about our memories. You have far more than I do.
We're older.
Wonderful memories.
We're old boys, yeah.
But how do you think everybody else is remembering the Queen? We know that the King and the Queen will be in Scotland this week for what is essentially Accession Day, isn't it? On Sunday, the big Braemar Games, right, and then they'll be in Scotland. Have people moved on? I mean, it's 2 years since the death of the late Queen. There's been a lot happening. We've got a new king. We've had Princess of Wales and battling her cancer, the King battling his cancer, and everything that's happening in California. Do you think enough people are taking time to sit down and remember how good the Queen was, or do you think people have moved on too quickly?
Well, I think that, since he became king, I remember the day he arrived back at Northolt from Scotland, and I was there, and I said to him, I'm so sorry about the loss of the Queen. And he said it was inevitable, it had to happen one day. And he was very philosophical about it. And he asked me if I was all right. And then I started covering his engagements, and the crowds were huge. I remember we went to Bolton, and I was 30 deep at one stage. So immediately, I think the loyalty for the Queen switched to him straight away. And I've noticed that everywhere I've gone now that the crowds are going to be huge. And it'll be interesting when we go to Australia later this year that see the crowds there, because the crowds for the Queen on her last trip to Australia, as I said earlier, were massive. And I'd be interested to see what happens this time.
Yeah, you're right about the crowds. I mean, we go on these engagements, you know what they're like, and I'm surprised about how many people are coming out. They're coming out to see the King, but they know Charles as well, because we've known Charles his entire life, so we know who he is. It's a tough act to follow, but just how do you think the King is getting on? Do you think he's succeeding?
Oh, I think 100%. He's doing a wonderful job. So far, he hasn't put a foot wrong. I mean, he's well taught. I mean, he's had the Queen teaching him for 70 years what to do, and I just think he's brilliant. I mean, his work with the environment, all the things he cares about. What do you think, Arthur?
I do. I'm his biggest fan. I mean, I really love working with him. I can't wait to do the next job with him. He's just an amazing man. And I don't know about you, Dick, but he, like your relationship with the Queen and mine isn't the same as that with the King, but he's done more for me than I could ever possibly do for him. And I'll never forget that. And, I can't wait to work with him again. And Queen Camilla, she's just an absolute joy to work with. And so for me, it's, I'm 84 now and I still want to go to work with him. And just because I really just like the man so much, I think what people don't realise is the things he does for people which nobody knows about, the kindnesses he shows to people throughout the world. And I've been there when he's done it. I remember once, so we were in Kathmandu and there was a refuge for these women that are returned from the brothels in India and after being trafficked to the brothels, and of course been rejected by their families. And he came back and he said to me, "What can we do for this? What can we do to help this woman?" I said, "What have you got in mind, sir?" He said, "Well, I thought," he said, we'd do a limited edition of one of my paintings of the Himalayas, and we'd sell it to some readers. What do you think?" Brilliant idea. And we sold, I think the pictures were framed for £250 each, and we could have sold 1,000. We could have sold 1,000, but we made about £80,000. And we bought the land in Nepal with the money, and a German industrialist built a complex on it. But it was him, what can we do to help this woman? And he just didn't talk about it. He did something about it. And nobody knows that.
Yeah.
Nobody knows that. He doesn't, and when you try and praise him, you try and say to him, you know, "Oh, it was great." And he always dismisses it. He doesn't want to know. I remember we were coming back from last time in Australia, and he was talking about the approval rating, and I said, "Well, it's up a lot, sir. Last time, you know, it's up. It's now 47%, 48%." And he starts, you know, and I said, "Why can't you take a compliment?" And he can't. He cannot. No. He uses that title of his to do good for others, only for others, never for himself. And you know, when people get to know that, and you can't, and he never boasts about it. He's very humble. And he said, and I think he's quoted as saying, "History will judge me." And there are thousands and thousands of people that have benefited from his kindnesses, and I'm one of them.
Yeah, well, he's just obviously, you know, his mother's son. Do you either of you see any similarities between the King and the late Queen? Or any obvious kind of, you talk about his kind of interaction with people and how, you know, how great he is talking to people and not looking for headlines, but is there anything that you see?
Well, I think the thing that comes through loud and clear is they both put duty.
Oh, yeah.
Duty before anything else.
Yeah.
Personal, they put all their personal things aside, and certainly the King and definitely the late Queen.
Yeah.
Duty came before everything.
Yeah, that's totally true. Yeah, everything's about that. They're never late. If they say they're going to do it, they do it. And they just, I don't know, the weather, it could be hailstones. They'll be there. They're just amazing family. And
as Arthur touched on, Queen Camilla.
Yeah,
she's exceptional.
Oh,
she is such a lovely. I didn't really know her until later in my time with the Queen, and we got to know her. And my gosh, what a lovely lady!
Oh, absolutely.
It's interesting. I speak to so many people when they, you know, her approval ratings are often low, and everybody who works with Queen Camilla, reports on the Queen Camilla, we all speak fondly of her, but that often doesn't translate to the public. Just one thing, just before we move on from this, is there's going to be a Queen Elizabeth Memorial Committee is meeting to discuss what kind of memorial that we can have for the late Queen. I think in 2026 they're going to announce their findings. Just very briefly, how do you think we could have a memorial? Would it be a statue, a special garden? Is there any way that you think the nation could actually remember her properly?
Well, I think it couldn't be, you know, just couldn't be big enough. I think it should be a garden with a statue as well of everything. You know, and I don't know where, maybe opposite in St James's Park, where she looked out every morning from the palace and saw it there, maybe in there, and have a beautiful garden and a great statue of her.
Yeah,
certainly. Yeah, I think that'd be true. Not many statues of the Queen, as we know, but you know, but another one perhaps. Yeah, I think.
I just hope we come up with a proper, sensible, not a woke idea. We need something, as Arthur says, a garden, a statue.
I think a garden would be nice. You know, the Queen Elizabeth Garden. You know, it's nice. You know, I travel on the Elizabeth line a lot. You know, and and I just think it's a great name. And then the Jubilee line, named after a Jubilee. You know, is it the Golden Jubilee? I think it was. It was just, these are great, there for us to remember this great lady, and I feel privileged that I worked with her for 40 years, and I think, and I've travelled to some amazing places with her and saw some amazing things. I mean, from the White House, I mean, when I don't know if you were there, Dick, when she made her speech and they could only see the top of her hat. Yeah. And I remember when my Alice Fraser picture was hugging the Queen, the press secretary said, well, could you give it to the American papers, please? I said, why? She said, well, at least they'll know the Queen is here. So, you know, those great moments. And I think about those, and I think about those when she said to me, I can't believe I'm giving you this, as she pinned my medal on me. I remember that. And once I used to send her little pictures from the tours, little sort of 6x4 pictures she put in her diary. And I remember her private secretary saying to me, look, you know she can't thank you for that, but she really likes it. And then I remember I think the Olympics, we had a reception at the Palace, and I was asked to welcome the Queen and the royal family on behalf of the newspapers. And the first thing she said to me, oh, thank you very much for all those pictures you sent me. She said. And of course I was stuck. I said, well, anytime, ma'am, just give me a call. I'll send you. I mean, never, ever, ever forget this lovely lady. You know, she was, she served this country brilliantly for over 70 years, and you know, got great fond memories of her, and always will have.
I've got a lovely letter at home from the Queen. You know, everyone knows at Christmas that the royal family exchange silly little gifts. Yeah. And when I was working, my guys in the office said to me, what are we going to give Her Majesty for Christmas this year? And I said, I've got just the idea. And we'd had a state visit a few months previously to, I think it was Oman, and one of my inspectors had been down the flea market, and Colin had bought these little tin ducks, cost about £3 each. You'd wind them up, and they'd go around the room, and they'd hit a wall, and they'd carry on, and every 30 seconds, they'd lay a little egg, and it would play music. And typical policeman, we bought 4 or 5 of these, and they were rationing them around the restaurant at lunchtime. And all the household said, oh, we want one of those for our children. So Colin had to go back to the flea market and buy 17 of these tin ducks. So anyway, when it came to Christmas, the lad said to me, what should we give the Queen for Christmas? I said, let's give her a duck. No. We can't give the Queen a duck. It only costs £3. She'll love it. Anyway, my wife wrapped it up all beautifully, and we gave it to the equerry to give to the Queen. And I said, if there's any fallback and it's just not appropriate, I'm the one to blame. Anyway, I saw the private secretary after Christmas. He said, do you know what? He said, we all gave the Queen beautiful gifts, and we got a sort of a 3-line letter of thanks. You guys have got a completely A4 written letter from the Queen, how it made the Christmas, how all the grandchildren enjoyed playing with this egg, personally signed, and it cost us £3 between 4 of us. So there you go.
Yes, amazing.
She must get, you know, every time she goes abroad, she gets all these wonderful gifts, lives in these wonderful palaces, something
and they're all going to a storage cupboard, and they're all labelled.
But not the duck.
Not the duck, no.
But they're all produced every time you get a visitor.
That's right. Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
They just happen to be put in the position of
right.
place.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, so we've just about fitted in some time for the quick-fire questions, which we like to do at the end of the show. So quick-fire questions, short answers, whatever you think is relevant. OK. Arthur, I'll start with you.
Yeah.
What, in your view, was the late Queen's single greatest achievement?
God. I probably... for 70 years, getting it right all the time. Okay. And always, I've been on time, you know, always. And the fact that, I suppose her biggest great achievement is she was 70 years with just duty all the time. I think if you looked at one particular time, you know, the fire at Windsor, the breakup of the marriages, you know, she was brilliant. And of course, when Diana died, you know, that amazing speech, and the fact that when the coffin went past back in the palace, I thought she was just amazing. So no, I think she's just, and obviously I didn't know some of these funny stories that you do, Dick. So
I thought you knew all my stories.
And Dick?
Yes.
What do you think is the late Queen's single greatest achievement?
Oh, 100%, what Arthur just said.
Yeah.
Never putting a foot wrong. 100%. I don't think anyone I know can say anything. I remember going to Australia, and when just after they'd had the vote on whether to be a republic or to stay with the Queen head of state, and it was like 0.5% or something to stay with the Queen head of state. And by the time the Queen left as the visit, people were saying that if you had the vote now, it'd be 80-20, because you just everyone just loved her and adored her.
And there wasn't one disparaging mark on that tour. Not one Australian made a disparaging mark against her.
No.
Not one, no.
I can't believe neither of you said the Queen leaping out of a helicopter at the London 2012 Olympics.
Well, you know, did she do that then?
Funny enough, with that story, we were sitting in the royal box, and I was sitting next to an ambassador from one of the Arab countries, and he turned to me and said, "Our king would never jump out of a helicopter." Oh, wow.
Yeah. Right, just a couple more. Just very quickly, Arthur, what do you think was the late Queen's biggest crisis of a 70-year reign?
Probably the Winds of Fire, I think. You know, I think she was really...
The Annus Horribilis that year.
That was the Annus Horribilis. And the same year she had to pay tax, so I imagine it wasn't a good year for her.
And Dick, what do you think was her biggest crisis?
I would say the death of Diane.
Right.
All the politics and the sadness around that, everything she had to deal with then.
Yeah, that was quite a decade, wasn't it? If you could say anything to the Queen right now, Dick, what would it be? If you had the chance to say anything to her.
Anything to the Queen? Thank you, ma'am, for so many wonderful memories. It was a joy working for her, and I miss you a lot.
And Arthur?
Yeah, I think I'd say that too. I think it was a joy to work with her. She was a total professional. You knew if you was patient enough, you'd get the picture.
And a final question. If she wasn't the Queen, okay, if it hadn't existed, what occupation do you think that she would have done? What would she have excelled in?
Probably diplomacy.
Racehorse trainer.
Yeah, or diplomacy, yeah. Been a great diplomat.
A great politician and a racehorse trainer. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you, guys. It's been incredible. We could have done this for 2 or 3 hours, I think, but we need to wrap up. So
okay, Matt.
Thanks very much. Right, well, thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you're always in the know of our latest episodes.